Hey everyone, so the general consensus seems to be that the main ability that's being focused on in Wano is Armament Haki. This is what Luffy has been working on improving. This seems to be the key to being able to damage Kaido, and a big deal has been made out of the fact that the scabbards are able to damage Kaido through the use of Ryo. However, I think that this is a bit of misdirection, and that as Wano continues, the focus is actually going to shift to the type of Haki that this arc is actually about, which is Conqueror's Haki. Regardless of whether or not you believe the Alliance is going to succeed in the Battle of Onigashima, I do think the arc is at least going to go on for a while longer, considering Act 3 hasn't even ended yet, and things seem to be going way too easily for the protagonists so far, obviously excluding these scabbards. As such, I do think Oda framed things going into Act 3 to give the reader a sense that things were going to be straightforward, with Luffy training in the Haki that should, on the surface, be the trick to defeating Kaido, when in reality, it may take some more growth for Luffy both in terms of strength and as a character before he is actually ready to win against a Yonko. Again, a lot of what we've been seeing so far seems like unearned overconfidence. Now, to be clear, I don't believe that Armament Haki won't play a big role in defeating Kaido. It has already been shown after all to be effective, just that Conquerors is going to be the final step in terms of growth for Luffy by the end of the arc. But before we get into that, make sure to like and subscribe for more One Piece content like this in the future. Now, I already made a video explaining why I believe that this is the arc that makes the most sense for Zoro to get Conqueror's Haki, so a lot of ideas from there will overlap here, as I get the general sense that this is just the Conqueror's Haki arc in general, which is why Zoro unlocking it for the first time and Luffy becoming advanced in Conqueror's Haki will kind of go hand in hand. So to start with, the notion that this arc is about Armament Haki seems a little off to me, because it's one thing for characters to showcase it frequently and for Luffy to train in it, but another thing entirely for that to be the main focus of growth in the arc. Oda seems to be trying to make the reader believe this is the case at the moment, but if we look back at Whole Cake Island, the arc where Luffy advanced his observation Haki, Oda went about writing that development to make it much more congruent with the story of the arc itself. Luffy, as we know, isn't particularly an observant or perceptive character all the time, and in many ways it's easy for him to be fooled. However, the one area where Luffy has always been extremely perceptive has been in his natural intuitions about what a person is like. That's something that's been played up throughout the entire series. That's why Luffy didn't need to hear Nami's backstory to know that she was a good person that he wanted on his crew. That's why he understood Sanji's true feelings in Whole Cake Island, the same way that he could see who Sanji was under his tough exterior back in Baratier. There's just countless examples throughout the series of Luffy being able to recognize who has a good heart. As such, in the arc where Oda chose to have Luffy develop his observation Haki, this was the angle Oda took. He wrote an arc that was largely about the importance of being true to oneself, with characters like Sanji, Pudding, and Katakuri being used to explore that idea. Who is this person inside, beyond the front that they're putting up? And with this theme being played up throughout the arc, it was only natural to frame Luffy's growth in observation Haki through the fact that he has always been good at understanding someone's true nature. The way Whole Cake Island was written, Luffy's growth in his ability fit perfectly with the themes of the arc. Now, with Wano, there is, as of yet, nothing you can easily point to the same way in terms of Armament Haki. Again, obviously Armament is frequently coming up as a trick to hurting Kaido, but does the narrative actually revolve around anything related to the concept of Armament Haki? What does Luffy's story in this arc have to do with growth in armament? The same way you could point to certain scenes in Whole Cake Island and tie them together with his later advancement in observation and say that, look, these ideas go hand in hand. This is the natural arc for Luffy to develop his observation because this story arc focuses on this aspect of his personality and how that plays into his ability to grow as an observation Haki user. Do I see the same thing or anything similar in Wano in terms of armament? I'd say no so far. Now, maybe we're not yet deep enough into Wano for the connection between Wano's themes and the idea of Armament Haki to become clear. The scene with Rayleigh that basically connected the dots for us in terms of observation Haki came very late in Whole Cake Island after all. If you really wanted to make the argument for armament in Wano, you could say that, well, Kaido's crew reflects toughness or something. They're really physically strong crew, so that fits with Armament or something like that. To me, that seems kind of weak, but I could kind of see it. You could also say that, Wano is going to be a very battle-heavy arc, so a lot of fighting means that it makes sense for it to be about Armament, though again, that seems weak to me. Like, is this arc going to focus on Luffy's character in terms of the fact that he fights a lot? Like, there doesn't seem to be a clear connect the way there was in Whole Cake Island with Luffy's intuitive nature being played up frequently before it was being shown that this was related to his future growth in observation haki. You could maybe even say that this is an arc about resiliency because the people of Wano have gone through a lot and they're still fighting. Maybe that connects to Armament in a vague way, though to me that still seems really loose because if anything, the idea of strength of spirit and refusal to be conquered fits better with Conqueror's haki. And ultimately that's the main point. Yes, I think you could make some very loose arguments for why Armament sort of makes sense here, or that maybe something down the road will piece it together for us why Armament is important for Luffy's growth here right now. But on the other hand, if you look at Conqueror's haki, you don't need to reach at all. There are already a million pieces throughout this arc that already suggest that the real story of Wano is heading in a direction that was always going to be about growth in Conqueror's haki, growth in Luffy's Conqueror spirit. The only thing that's really missing is the fact that advanced Conqueror's haki, which I expect Luffy to get this arc, or what advanced Conqueror's haki would even entail, that hasn't been brought up yet explicitly. Though keep in mind that advanced observation haki was itself brought up only very late in the game in Whole Cake Island. I think it is very, very likely that Wano was always meant to ultimately feature Luffy's growth in Conqueror's haki, and that is what most of the writing in the arc has been setting things up for. It's just that Oda gave us Armament first as the more straightforward, surface-level focus of the first half of the arc, before getting deeper into the arc where the importance of Conquerors will come to the forefront. So, what am I talking about? What in this arc points to it being about Conquerors above anything else? So, Conqueror's haki itself is the idea of having the spirit or disposition of a king, of standing above others rather than following or being subservient. That's why when someone like Odin chooses to be a subordinate, it's considered notable. Now, as soon as the storyline of Wano started, it was spelled out for us that in this land, in Kaido's land, you either submit and serve the strong, or you hide. The more we learn about Kaido's crew, the real theme that we see is being stressed over and over is this idea of broken will and submissions, with all of these members in Kaido's crew being former captains who wanted the One Piece themselves, who ultimately all submitted and learned to serve the strong. This entire crew revolves around this sense of competition and hierarchy, where they compete to rise higher in the crew, yet simultaneously all of them are accepting that Kaido is the undisputed king at the top of the pile. And that's really Kaido's whole MO, that he created his crew by finding strong warriors with strong spirits only to break them and make them submit to him. Kaido is the ultimate conqueror. He embodies the idea that there can only be one king, only one person standing at the top of the pack, and he goes about breaking the spirits of his competitors and making them submit and serve him. That's the real theme of his crew. That's exactly what he wanted to do, and likely still wants to do, to Luffy. And this all goes back to their first and only interaction, which I've talked about in previous videos, but has to be brought up again here. Kaido's entire interaction with Luffy is challenging the idea that Luffy is any sort of king. Kaido's intent is to show Luffy he is not a king. He wants to break this indomitable spirit that Luffy still has even after being defeated. And their whole interaction ends with Luffy literally leaking Conqueror's haki even in defeat. Kaido then comments that there don't need to be so many people with Conqueror's spirits, and leaves after also saying he intends to break that spirit. So that entire first scene to me sets the stage pretty early on regarding what the dynamic between Luffy and Kaido will be about. Can Kaido break Luffy's spirit? Can he turn him from a would-be king into his soldier? And then everything we've learned about Kaido and his crew since then only reinforces this idea, with us being shown over and over that this is what Kaido is all about. Taking captains, taking leaders, taking strong warriors, would-be pirate kings, breaking their spirits, and making them submit to him. He is the one who stands above all others. This type of character is written in every sense to be the ultimate test of Luffy's conqueror spirit. Either submit or refuse to be dominated. And this lurking significance of Conqueror's haki in this arc, this idea that there's not room for multiple kings, this is hinted at and referenced in many ways. Of course with Kaido's quote about not being enough room for so many conquerors, but even offhand quotes from characters like Zoro, who himself comments on how too many captains can't function together. Or during the flashback we have Whitebeard referencing the difficulty of multiple conquerors coexisting. So, a quick recap is basically that, considering Wano has been playing up the idea of how there's not room for multiple conquerors, considering how Kaido's entire MO revolves around the idea that he takes the strong and breaks their spirits so that everyone ultimately submits to him, so that he is the only one at the top, considering that the law of Wano and the law of Kaido is basically submit or die, that the entire premise of Luffy's first interaction with Kaido is Kaido challenging the notion that Luffy is any sort of king, or that his spirit is truly indomitable. This all clearly seems framed as the arc where Luffy's Conqueror's Haki should be put to the test, and it should either break or grow in the face of a villain that wants to make him bow down. With that in mind, does this make sense for where Luffy's at in his journey so far? Well, first of all, we can look at it two ways. First, in the grander scheme of things, beyond just the Wano arc, yes, we've been told that the Yonko rule the seas and either you submit to them or you challenge them. And these past couple arcs leading up to Luffy challenging Kaido and Big Mom, a lot of foreboding ideas have come into play that basically frame this as the ultimate test of if Luffy has what it takes to go beyond just being, an upstart rookie in the New World, or someone with a real claim to the top. We have Brûlé talking about how going up against the Yonko is when most pirates hit the wall and realize they don't have what it takes to be king. We have Kaido talking about how now they will realize that they've only been playing little pirate games. We have Luffy coming out of Whole Cake Island, not necessarily with a big win, but having made a big step forward, and even being framed to look like the old king of the pirates, with him finally starting to get at least some acknowledgement that he may have the potential to get to the top. We have some characters calling him an emperor, and then others not considering him one yet. And so this arc, Wano, seems like the final test. This is what everything has been building up to, where he finally goes up against the villain who is specifically all about breaking the aspirations of those who want to become king. Either Luffy can take down these emperors and prove he actually can be a king on the ocean, or he has his spirit broken and is made to submit. Is he a king in the making, or is he playing little pirate games? That's what this arc comes down to. And if we look at what's actually happening within the arc itself, what Luffy's journey through Wano has been, yes, this seems very clearly like the first arc that we are seeing the emergence of Luffy the king. Luffy the leader, Luffy the conqueror, whatever you want to call it, but up till now, the fact is in the story Luffy has had, yes, good moments of leadership in small groups throughout One Piece, but this Wano is the arc where it's finally putting him in that position of leadership on a much, much larger scale. Act 1 has him claiming Okobore Town as his territory, Act 2 ends with him claiming Udon as his territory, and Act 3 now has him at the forefront of the entire army of Wano going into battle. Luffy and Kinemon are clearly the two leaders of this alliance, and Kinemon has even openly made it clear that even if Kinemon dies, then Luffy will be picking up where he leaves off. This really is the arc where Luffy is having to help an entire country rise up to its feet, and even in this prison mine scene, we can see Momonosuke specifically highlighting how Luffy is setting a standard of leadership that the people of Wano need to see. So, all of that is to say that where Luffy's at in his long-term journey, and everything he's been doing specifically right now in Wano, all seem to point to this being the perfect stage for him to advance as a king, and by extension to advance his Conqueror's Haki to the next level over the course of his battle with Kaido. Now the last point I'll make here is actually something I saw on a Reddit post a long while back that I haven't been able to find since, but it was an interesting enough point that I'll mention it here. So Conqueror's Haki has a bit of a trend throughout the series of, taming the beast. What do I mean by that? Well, the very first usage of Conqueror's Haki was in the first chapter, where Shanks first uses it to terrify a Sea King and send it away. Then the first time that Luffy used it was in a very similar situation, where Luffy used it to intimidate Motobaro and send him away. Is 2 times enough to call this a trend? No, but these 2 times were at the very least pretty significant moments, with Shanks and the Sea King being the first time that Conqueror's Haki was ever shown, and Luffy and Motobaro being the first time that Luffy ever used Conqueror's Haki. I wonder if the moment that Luffy finally uses advanced Conqueror's Haki for the first time in the series would be against a beast, the ultimate beast, Kaido. Oda did, after all, once say that Luffy shouldn't defeat Kaido simply because Luffy's punch is so strong. And advanced Armament Haki is really just giving Luffy a really hard-hitting punch. If this was always meant to be a test of Luffy's spirit, then ultimately unlocking advanced Conqueror's Haki to defeat Kaido, the king of the beasts, would be defeating Kaido truly because Luffy's spirit is just that strong. Too strong for even Kaido to break. Now lastly, let me address a few objections. First, I've heard a lot of people say that, well, Luffy advanced his observation in Whole Cake Island, he seems to be advancing his armament in Wano, so then shouldn't Conqueror's Haki come in Elbaf? And I get, that makes sense in a really straightforward, surface level sort of way, especially since my Shanks and Elbaf theory became really popular, and now a lot of people seem to think that this fits even better now, because Luffy will then get advanced Conqueror's Haki in the arc that Shanks is in, since Shanks has always kind of been shown to be the guy that seems to be an all-around Haki specialist. So I guess people think that Shanks is going to train Luffy in the last part of Conqueror's Haki or something like that. I think that's very unlikely because to me the dynamic of Luffy and Shanks should never be about Luffy learning anything more from Shanks. Shanks isn't going to meet Luffy until Luffy has become a great pirate, right? That's the same reason Shanks didn't meet Luffy at the war. I don't think the arc where Luffy and Shanks finally meet is supposed to be an arc of growth for Luffy. I think if they meet in Elbaf, Luffy should be meeting Shanks as a great pirate on equal standing with him. Luffy's crew should be a Yonko crew just as good, if not even better than Shanks's at that point. I don't imagine Luffy training more or having to learn something new once he meets Shanks to get onto Shanks's level, because to me that would defeat the idea behind what the reunion is supposed to symbolize in the first place. A meeting of two great pirates on the same level with crews of the same level. From there, if there's a Davy back fight or whatever, as I personally believe, it would be a test of how far Luffy has come, but not necessarily a setup where Luffy should have more to learn from Shanks. To be clear, that's not to say that I think that Luffy has to be at his final end of story strength when he meets Shanks. I don't think that's the case. I'm sure Luffy can and will become stronger after meeting Shanks. I'm just saying that he and his crew should at least be equal to Shanks and his crew by the time they meet. And I think it would be a showcase of how far the Straw Hats have come, rather than a stage for new growth and development the way Wano has been for them. Not to mention, especially if Luffy and Shanks meet on Elbaf, then it really doesn't make sense to me to think that the arc would fit the themes of Conqueror's Haki at all. Like right now, in Wano, we're in an arc where there is an entire nation that needs to rise up to fight an oppressor. A nation desperately in need of leadership, a situation where Luffy is at the forefront as a leader of this giant nation. We have a conflict where the villain is all about breaking the spirits of would-be kings and conquering them. Like everything in the setup we've had leading up to Wano over hundreds of chapters is already pointing to this being the perfect setup for Luffy to take the next step and prove that he has the makings of a king. Whereas in Elbaf, are we going to get another huge war where Luffy has to be a leader of an entire nation? If anything, I and most other people believe Elbaf is set to be a much shorter arc. And yes, Shanks is great at Conquerors, but that's not the same as having a villain that is all about breaking the spirits of those with Conquerors. I think a lot of people's tendency to believe that Elbaf will be about Conquerors really just comes down to people liking the symmetry of, okay, so first Whole Cake Island with Observation, then Armament and Wano, and then Conquerors and Elbaf. However, I personally view it differently in that I think that this whole, versus 4 Emperor saga that started with Zou and is set to conclude in Wano, and I think that this saga has just been repeatedly been framed as the testing ground for whether Luffy can rise to the next level and actually take down the Emperors, which is why I feel this storyline as a whole, this whole saga, is about featuring Luffy taking each type of Haki to the next level by the end of it. Wano is much longer than Whole Cake Island, very possibly twice as long or even more by the end of it, so I just feel like the split that makes the most sense is Whole Cake Island was Luffy's growth in Observation, then the first half of Wano was Luffy's growth in Armament, and then the final half would be Luffy's final step of growth for the saga, improving his Conquerors. To me, that rounds out this whole versus 4 Emperors storyline very nicely, with it starting with Luffy still being looked at as a rookie who's challenging the Emperors, and over the course of this large conflict with Kaido and Big Mom, he has to grow his Haki in all 3 ways, with the final step being growing his Conqueror's Haki to complete his emergence as a true contender for Pirate King. Once Luffy has basically taken a level up in all 3 aspects by the end of this saga, then the stage, in my opinion, is set for Luffy to finally meet up with Shanks as a truly great pirate of equal standing. To me, that split makes more sense. I guess the next objection is that, well, some people might say that it makes more sense for Luffy to advance his Conqueror's Haki only at the final climax of the story when he finally becomes Pirate King or in the final battle or whatever. To me, that doesn't really make sense, as I don't really view getting advanced Conqueror's Haki as the sort of simultaneous step necessary to becoming Pirate King. Rather, his advanced Conqueror's Haki should come out before the final battle starts as basically the bare minimum for him to even have a claim to becoming Pirate King. Like, again, Luffy is not yet viewed as an emperor or a king by the people who matter. As of this moment, he is still just an upstart rookie. He is still just a boy. For him to even stake his claim and challenge for the title of King of the entire seas, first he needs to step up and show that he has the qualities of a king, period. Again, that's what the entire conflict between Kaido and Luffy seems like it's going to come down to me, whether Luffy truly has the spirit and disposition to stand above, if he really is a king in the making, or if he's going to hit this wall and have his spirit crushed. So, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe. And you can support me on Patreon to get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics.